Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the HootBoard Visitor Information and Destination Marketing Podcast. I am your host, Brian Reynolds, and with me today is Satya Shahade, CEO of HootBoard. Satya, how are you?
Doing good, man. How are you?
Oh, also good. The weather's getting nice over here. It's getting a lot nicer here in Kansas. A lot of, it's clearing off, getting outside a little bit more, and I'm enjoying myself right now. Now, today we have a great guest. We were really excited to talk to this gentleman today. Today, we are talking with Travis Napper, who is the Director of Tourism within the Arkansas Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism. Napper previously served as President and CEO of the Ruston Lincoln Parish Convention and Visitors Bureau, and is the Director of the Orientation at Louisiana Tech University in Ruston, Louisiana, before his move to Arkansas in April, a relatively recent move. So welcome, Travis Napper. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here, and us too. Great weather here, and the pollen has all been knocked down, thank goodness, and the yellow haze has moved on, and we're just now on those late spring showers and some great, beautiful days here.
I agree. I like New Jersey, Philadelphia area. The pollen was crazy last few weeks, but it's definitely kind of reduced last. I should say just this week. It's been much better now. So
yeah,
I can't get over that background. I can't get over that background, Travis. That background, that is beautiful. Like, it's hard to believe I'm up in Kansas, and that's only about 4 hours, maybe 5-hour drive from me.
I know, right?
I need to make my way down there more often.
When you're ready to make the trip, let me know, and I will meet you there.
Yeah, you guys are gonna face over tourism on that block after this podcast. You're gonna be like that thing is gonna be people. You're gonna have to put barricades around there. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
I don't want to see barricades, but if we have over tourism as a problem, that will be a good one to face in the light of the kind of problems we've been facing with
COVID. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, and speaking of Arkansas, you're talking about kind of over the last year, and I kind of wanted to ease into this a little bit, do something a little bit different. So Satya and I, when we were researching this episode, we were learning a lot about Arkansas, and that's one of the great things we get to do when we research for an episode, is we learn a lot about the state, the area, the people who promote it, the personalities, and the history. And we kind of wanted to start off a little bit lighter here, not lighter, actually. This is a little bit heavier, to be quite honest with you. It's actually kind of a heavy topic, but I wanted to talk a little bit about this historical piece of information here. It's called, it was a piece on your website. It was called The Sultana versus Titanic. And it talks about kind of a lesser known kind of, bad event in history. Can you talk a little bit about that, Travis? Do you have any feedback or any information on that?
Yeah, I can, and relatively new to the position, but I have since become pretty familiar with this just because of some developments that are happening around it, which is kind of interesting. And most likely, many people have probably never heard of the Sultana or the Sultana disaster or any of that, but to this day, still remains America's greatest maritime disaster. And this was a riverboat heading up, taking Union soldiers after the Civil War that had been prisoners of war in the South, returning them north to their families. So this was one of many boats that did this, but this one was very overcrowded. It was only supposed to hold about 375 people, including the crew. They ended up with over 2,200 people.
Oh my God.
Basically every possible place available was full of people.
A fire hazard.
Almost all of them were these prisoners of war returning home and not in great health situations, and to the point that some were stacked in every nook and cranny they could find. Granted, most of them were happily in that position trying to get home and into a much better place. But in the middle of the night, a boiler explosion happened. And with that, all those people and crew and everything else in the middle of the night while the water of the Mississippi River is still very cold at the time, they wake up to this explosion, and if they weren't, part of that explosion and instantly passed, they were, in a true fight for survival at a time when swimming wasn't, such a recreational activity, and many didn't know how to swim. And with the cold waters anyway, it wasn't an ideal place to be, even if you knew how to swim, and they weren't in the greatest shape either. With all that being said, of those about 2,200, about 1,800 died, and about 500 or so survived. So quite a disaster. And this article is a Sultana versus the Titanic. How does that happen? You have something like Titanic that is kind of the whole other end of the spectrum. Quite a tragedy, as we all know. But like we said, we all know about it. Movies, books, mini movie. I mean, it's this thing of lore. Now, why did this other disaster not get much, headlines, even though this is in kind of a similar time period? But this happened 12 days before the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Or no, 12 days after, excuse me. So that, as you can imagine, consumed all the media at the time.
That was the headline.
The assassination, the chase for the one who shot him. I mean, and news wasn't disseminated like it is today. So that wasn't all consuming. So I mean, that's some of the differences, but it's quite amazing. Just, you had this all wood structure that was about a fourth of the size of the Titanic, yet had more people on it. It was way over capacity, as I said, where the Titanic was actually, they could have fit almost 100 more people, I think.
Wow.
On it. So yet they had great losses too. Over 1,500 passed from the Titanic, 700 survived, but still the Sultana lives as the greatest maritime disaster. And then Marion, Arkansas, which is just outside of West Memphis, is just kind of north of it, is where one of the bends in the river is where this happened, kind of along a string of islands. And this was a time where the river was a little more flooded and the levee system wasn't quite what it is now. So that area is now dry land as we know it, but it is buried under decades and decades of silt and dirt and soil from the river as it moved. But that area has a small museum, and they're in the process of doing a capital campaign to restore an old WPA gym to have a first class museum highlighting this. That'll be, it's less than 15 minutes from downtown Memphis, Tennessee. So this will be a great addition into that part of the state. And it'll be right off of I-40, which is a very heavily trafficked interstate going east-west, right off of I-55 that goes north-south. So a great intersection of travelers crossing across this part of the United States. So we're excited about what that'll mean for letting people understand this history, but also, what it means is giving another great tourism asset in that part of the state that'll benefit, honestly, some of Tennessee and some of us. So,
yeah. Well, what a story! It's I have goosebumps all over me. But just imagining yourselves in the shoes of those soldiers trying to get back home after what was probably the worst years of their lives to begin with, and it doesn't matter what side of history you were on. War is a war, and being a prisoner of war is being a prisoner of war. Most of us don't want to be there. Most of us don't have to go through it. Yep. And the fact that they were on the last leg of that journey, and then couldn't make it. It's so tragic. It's so heartfelt.
Quite interesting. Yeah. To make it through what they survived through the war, and to get that close, and then go through that kind of tragedy there to this day. This happened in 1865. There's still meetups of family of these people, of the survivors, because the survivors started meeting up very quickly in the years following that, and that has successfully happened up to these days, which was quite interesting. And they've done it here in Arkansas, they've done it in Tennessee and Kentucky. They move around kind of this South and Midwest area, because a lot of them, that's where they're getting back to, that Midwest area. But quite an impact that has impacted generations of those.
Yeah, but I mean, it talks about so many things here. I mean, of course, how deep this is buried in the history, because in spite of being such a major event, for a variety of reasons where it's just not talked about. I mean, I had not heard of it. I talked to once I read that article, I talked to a few people, and they're like, I don't know what Sultana is. And it's amazing. We hear a lot of much stories, not that they're unimportant, they're stories of much smaller scale and size, right? But they are so much more glorified. And this is something that probably needs to see light of day in terms of historical record and the conversation there. But it also talks a lot from this audience's perspective. It also talks a lot about what offices like yours can do to kind of, expose and bring this history back into light, and then, make people aware of it, but also create assets, tourism assets for the future. So not only people get to learn about this, but at the same time, it creates an economical attraction, so to speak. So when is this, since you have this opportunity to plug for whoever might be listening, when is this museum, or is it still in early stages when this might go live?
There is a museum, albeit very small at this point, that will remain up until the new one is open. They're about halfway to their fundraising goal but they just kind of announced it just a month ago. I was over there for the announcement, and the governor was there, and he dedicated some state money towards it as well. And with that right off the bat, already put them close to halfway there. They feel very good about where it's going, and the design they have laid out is first class, which is exciting to give this story the ability to be told so well will be quite interesting, and we're excited about that. I mean, I know there's at least two, because I have two of them. There might be at least a third book about this. There's been, I think, a couple kind of mini documentary series, and I know they're actually looking at one now, since those have become extremely popular through all these streaming services. There's conversations about that too, to kind of continue to bring light to this.
Yeah, that's good to know that the story is being told, because it definitely deserves to be told. And I'm glad we got the opportunity to talk about it as well. So this begs a question for me, just kind of moving on, but still kind of staying on the talk about Arkansas. If we were coming down, spending 2 or 3 days, what other places would you like to plug? If we were going to do a road trip around Arkansas, what other places you would like to plug before we move on to actual topics here?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to tell you about it. I mean, as you can see from the background, I mean, we are the natural state, and we have it in abundance. I mean, so I'm going to start there. And I think a lot of people should look at that, whether, our mountain vistas or clear running streams. I mean, some of the best, and I'm not going to say most, but we have a ton, and there are new trails popping up every month or so. Mountain biking trails. I mean, tremendous trails all over the state. And then other, not just mountain biking, but gravel grinding, which is a little different, as well as, the road cycling. And we have a good bit of that works its way all the way from the Delta, which is very flat, very different than Northwest and what you see here. So you can have a variety of different experiences on a bike here, which is become extremely popular. We're, home to the first national river, the Buffalo River. It's in this area. If you were standing on that bluff, you would be less than 20 minutes from being able to get in a canoe and do the Buffalo River, which is an amazing experience and beautiful. And it can be as challenging or as a nice little float as you want, depending on the time of year and what part of the river you're getting in. We're also home to the first national park of Hot Springs National Park, which still have the operational bathhouses of those that run off of those hot springs, and even has the only brewery inside a national park there that uses those hot springs to brew the beer.
Nice.
So that's a
wow.
pretty cool deal. And Hot Springs has so much going on there with the downtown area that butts right up against that national park, and mountain bike trails, hiking trails right up from there. Tons of history with gangsters and the old baseball spring training and the old mystical healing powers of those waters, as well as kind of the recreational side when you get out to the lake. And there's 2 or 3 other lakes around there. So much to do around that, whether you're talking about hiking, floating, fishing, hunting, cycling, golf, ATV riding, hang gliding, and now emerging backcountry aviation is something that we're working with different groups to offer. And we're actually, I can plug this, we're doing typically in the spring, we'll do like a road trip giveaway kind of thing. And this year, instead of a road trip, it is a backcountry aviation trip where you'll be able to do some backcountry fly-ins, stay with some kind of nice glamping opportunities and then experience some of the best and most remote but yet untouched beauty, natural beauty, with some cycling or fishing. We have great trout fishing, which you wouldn't think, but those were introduced. And because we have so many great deep lakes, we're able to have that cold water year round for those to flourish in. I know I've talked a whole lot about the outdoors, and I know that doesn't fit everybody, but on the urban side, we can offer a good bit there. I know a lot of times in tourism, we don't want to say we got something for everybody. When you're an entire state, a lot of times you can say that a little bit better. Bentonville is home to so much of those mountain bike trails and area, but also one of the finest American art museums. Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art is up there, and it is fantastic, and doesn't stop indoors. You step out and they have so much outdoor visual art within the nature. They have it's called Northern Lights in the winter time. In the fall, that is a evening or nighttime walk through lighted artistic experience that involves mist and smoke and lights, and it's really cool. I got to go up and do it with my kids this past year, and it was awesome. And then here in Little Rock, I mean, tons of culture, art, history, museums, Presidential Museum here, a historic place like Little Rock Central High School is here as well, and tremendous dining that I'm so thankful for. Since moving here, we have thoroughly enjoyed, despite COVID. We have hit up as many restaurants as possible. And inexpensive family activities. We have 52 state parks in our state park system. That's one of our sister divisions here. And they're of all different kinds, and some have more history, some are your outdoor experiences, some are camping, some's cabins, some lodges. They've gotten into the mountain biking game as well, and have 4 different mountain bike premier mountain bike trails as well. But those are all free, completely free to enter, which that's not the case in all states.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
We celebrate our some of our native sons, Johnny Cash and Bill Clinton, and what they've contributed to the American culture and to the history. Looking at their boyhood homes, as well as the Presidential Library, and the significance of growing up in the Delta and what that meant, and how he was influenced by that, and musically, and then how he was able to influence so many others. Johnny Cash, that is.
Correct.
So whole lot there. One last thing. This is kind of a neat thing, and I've actually yet to do it, but you're talking about kind of those one of a kind kind of opportunities, there's a place, it's in one of our state parks, Crater of Diamond State Park in Murfreesboro, not too far from Hot Springs, Arkansas. You can dig for diamonds there, and
Oh, wow.
you get
There
to
you go.
keep what you find. It
Nice.
is the
Really?
only one in the country and possibly the world that you can dig yourself. The average Joe can dig for themselves and keep what they find. And you see the tourism and numbers spike there anytime there's an announcement of a diamond found. And they average, I think, 30 to 40 found at least every year.
Wow.
That's pretty
Now,
good.
those are varying sizes, but they have found, the largest diamond found in America was found there. So, and not that America is well known for its diamond mining, but that is where, I want to say 14 carats or something. So, that's a very good size.
That's a good
And
size.
the second largest one was found, I think, only 3 years ago. So, and it was, I think, 9 carats or so.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's-
so there's
Don't
still-
quote me
still
on those. I
more
might
to
be a little
come.
off, but those are quite large diamonds. So yeah, that is a neat kind of one of a kind experience that you could have here.
So that's pretty neat. And is there like a fee to go in and be able to mine that? Is there like someone controlling?
It is not. There is it's ticketed, especially right now, just to limit how many can be there at a time, but not for, it's not a pay thing. Now you can rent materials to use, to dig, to sift, but you can also bring your own if you have them. But I don't have my own diamond mining materials, so I might use theirs. But that's just a small rental fee. But other than that, you just make sure you reserve your ticket ahead of time. Basically, just reserve your spot, and then you're free to go in.
That is pretty neat. I had not heard of that. I had heard of we have obviously heard of gold digging and those kinds of opportunities, but this is very interesting. You're going to start a diamond rush there now.
Yeah.
Maybe so. Yeah, we're well known for our diamond and our quartz as well. And quartz, I know, aren't near as valuable, but on the large scale. But I've been reading some articles about, we have a guy that around here that has a tremendous collection worth lots and lots of money, but he has some of very large ones and unique ones that I don't know what makes them exactly special, but quartz is always, growing up, visiting my family up here was always the neatest thing to find those. And as a kid, they feel really special.
Yeah.
It might not help in the pocket, but they always feel really cool. And it's neat how you can find them sliced through the middle of these huge boulders and stuff. So it's really, really neat thing here.
And that's a good reason for me. I keep on saying this. Make a drive down there. It's only 4 to 6 hours from anywhere from my eastern Kansas, and sounds like you serve probably eastern Texas. It's a pretty short drive from middle part of Missouri. It's like almost a 4 to 6 hour drive from Louisiana.
Yes,
so it's really well located or central located.
We're primarily drive-in destination. We have a huge amount of traffic that comes from Texas and the Dallas area for the different kind of activities we can offer. That's quite a bit different terrain than what you can find there. And same with Louisiana and Mississippi. It's just we can offer something that cannot be found there. And then our other touch states provide a very good bit of traffic as well.
It's pretty I look at it and it seems like very diverse, and then also accessible from all these central states. We kind of looked at Hot Springs at some point in time, and I was amazed at how that particular destination is laid out. It's in between mountains just like these, but then the city is laid out almost like an artery, at the bottom of these hills. And I'm pretty sure there's lots of good things there for anyone who wants to go in as a vacation spot.
It is a really neat place, and a place I visited many times growing up.
That's awesome. Okay, if we want to move on, we covered some history, very interesting history. We covered, talked about Arkansas. Now, Travis, we want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about you and get to know you a little bit more in your background. Can you take us through your career journey and, from Louisiana to Arkansas in April? So just kind of take us through your background and how you came to be here.
Sure. I grew up in North Louisiana, went to Louisiana Tech University. It's kind of where all our family has gone. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I ended up in marketing, and like I said, didn't know what I was going to do, and little did I know, I picked the right major as I get down the road. I went to work at the university for a while, did that 6 years, and I didn't know it was really preparing me quite well for getting into the destination marketing area. I mean, being over orientation, arguably we worked with as with the most different parts of the university. As you bring them all together, you bring all the new students together to experience all the different parts they have, and you're selling the university experience. And I then ended up stumbling into opportunity to lead the DMO there, Experience Ruston, and we represented Ruston, Louisiana, and Lincoln Parish, just north central Louisiana, and home to two universities, Louisiana Tech University and Grambling State University, an HBCU with a tremendous history there. So I kind of, it wasn't that big of a jump to, go from selling the university to selling the entire community that included the university. And what do you do when you're in these roles? You're working with, you bring apart all parts of the community together. So we know about it, and they're in tune with what we're doing, so we can sell it to the visitors and make them aware of it. So did that for about 8 years, and wasn't looking to go anywhere. Perfectly happy there, and got a call about this opportunity, and I had some family ties up here in Hot Springs, actually, and I thought, I think I'd jump at a chance of a new challenge, and in a place with this kind of beauty and a lot of the assets they have here. I like the thought of that. Now, I will also say I agreed to that in February. And what happened later in February and March, something we didn't know about, which was COVID. Granted, that would
just
have been
perfect timing, right?
Yes. So I say my first day, official day, was April 1st, so April Fool's Day, and I kind of said, I guess the joke was on me. When it came to COVID. Yes, it absolutely was.
All of us.
But took about 6 months to meet my entire staff, and we have only all been back on a regular basis here for a little over a month now, which is, for me, kind of a social person, nice to finally all be back and kind of move the center of gravity away from our couches and our kitchen tables to back to the office, which is nice. Awesome. And then as soon as we do that, then we all shoot off and go to all of our different events that we have to go to. So
now you have to actually do the work. That's cool. But this is amazing story, because you literally kind of went from from a university to basically a community, and now to an entire state. It's definitely just, you have been expanding that circle of influence, which is great, which is I think for anyone a great career path to look at as well, in these things. But what are the differences that you find? You kind of mentioned some of the common things that you do. You're bringing people together and stuff. What are some of the differences that you find across these three levels of jobs? And it's kind of the same job in some ways, but it's different, I'm sure, right?
It is. I mean, one difference is the amount of money involved has been, budget-wise, has just been different. The resources we have to go and use to do that, all those all the parts of those jobs have grown in each situation, which has been neat and fun. And especially with the new technologies that are coming out, I mean, it offers the ability to actually not just see them, say, man, I wish I could do that. And now I can, where you have to be a little more, well, sometimes you just, as much as you want to do it, you just don't have the dollars to do it, unfortunately. Until it's become more streamlined and becomes more reasonable. You can't always be on the front early adopter stage when you don't have quite the funds. So that is a difference. Size of staff has grown. At the university, I did actually have a decent sized staff, but it wasn't full time. It was student worker, student leaders that I had, but that was about 20. But they weren't full time with you all the time. And then in Ruston, we had anywhere, we fluctuated between 3 and 5 on staff. And now here, 20 right here in central office. And then I have another 50 to 60 in our welcome centers across the state. So that is definitely an area that I'm having to grow in and learn, and more people, more personalities, and but at the same time, more people, more skill sets that you can utilize for
and
all the different things we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And this seems like, and Brian, this might have been one of our thought questions anyways, but this seems like there's a lot of opportunities where, especially at a city or a particular destination and a state level, there must have been a lot of, or there must be a lot of ways to work together. But I imagine a lot of these relationships are very kind of nebulous. They are handshake driven. I'm sure we saw like you were doing some grants and stuff, and these are direct, but I guess let me ask the question differently. If I was at a city level tourism or a DMO, how do I make the most out of my relationship with the state level, right? Like what should we be doing? And you have worked on both sides now, and granted this one, you're just kind of getting into it, getting started here. But what are your thoughts on that, having been on both sides?
Well, having been on both sides and seen it from both sides and experienced it and seen kind of how it's worked in 2 different states, it's kind of neat as well. Communication just is first and foremost, and that is I look at that completely as, that's a two-way street. I mean, yes, as a city, you want to know what the state's strategies are and what their plans are and their opportunities that you can be a part of that. But those cities and those communities and DMOs, they offer the state that is only in one place and is marketing so much area. They provide that local insight that we can't always get on the daily basis. They understand that. So I see communication just number one. I mean, and that is, built on relationships that
Correct.
Guide us all, hopefully at least. And working with the group as a whole, and that's the beauty I've seen, and kind of a difference from when I was at the university. And we would participate in conferences and stuff with other, educational things with other people doing recruitment and orientation and stuff. And for me as a competitive person, and I saw that there, it was still, there was people sharing information, but it was still much more guarded, because if you came to my university, you probably weren't going to the other one. Some people are going to transfer, and now if you play college sports, maybe you do that a whole lot more if y'all follow college sports. But the average person isn't transferring a ton. Whereas in tourism, they can visit me this week and visit you the next week and come back to me and then go to the next one and next one. So it is so much more welcoming and helpful and cooperative, which I appreciated greatly and tried to take advantage of. And I think that first starts, if you're a CVB, is being part of any regional or especially your state association of CVBs, and AACVB here in Louisiana, LACVB. Those were key groups that were a great connection between the state and those CVBs, where you built those relationships and that trust to have that two-way communication. And we know what goals they're having, because I constantly say, their success, when they're having success, we're having success. And we firmly believe when we're having success, they're having success. That's at least the way we're funded here. I know not all states are funded the same way, but we are primarily funded through a lodging and hospitality tax, like a lot of CVBs and DMOs are. So, and that's how they are as well here. So, it truly, if someone's staying in a hotel in any of our cities, that's good for them, and it's good for us. And if we drove it, that's good for them and us. And if they drove it, that's good for them and us. So, the success is mutual. So, don't look at us as enemies or as super competition, but
it's a team. It's a team.
Especially on the state level. So, and you know, and I mean, we're not a humongous state and with endless resources, and even the biggest state, their resources can't compete with the real big boys of marketing. I mean, you can put us all together and our numbers don't compete. So we have to collaborate and pool resources to be effective for what we're trying to do and what the communities are doing.
Yeah, we always talk in our one-on-one conversations, we always get that opportunity to talk about, hey, listen, and you mentioned this a little bit, is once people are gonna come, you want to be able to make the best use of them, because you already spent the money to bring them in. Whether it's the state or the city that brought them in, it does not matter. They are in your funnel in marketing terms, and towards the bottom of the funnel, you want to make sure that you serve them right, because they can go anywhere, firstly. And secondly, if you can bring them back, that's a great thing. But again, competing with other DMOs, especially the ones next to you or your state, it's just a folly, because you're all increasing your advertising rates. You're all advertising in only so many places, and you cannot compete with the big boys to begin with. But at the same time, if you start competing with each other, it's just draining all of your resources collectively, and there's only so much to go around. So coming up with strategies that make sure that, hey, you are actually collaborating more than competing is probably a smart thing to do. So, and a lot of the DMOs obviously realize that, but it's something that I feel like it's not talked about enough. So I'm glad you brought some of these things up as well. I don't know. I was very curious about how you guys do things, but Brian, I'll let you jump in with anything else I might have missed out.
Well, I just kind of wanted to kind of pick up what Travis said there as well. He mentioned kind of a saying that there's a professional golfer I really like he had a saying I really liked. I kind of say it over. His name is Todd Hamilton, and he's a British Open winner. And he would say success breeds success. Even though he got really good on like kind of the smaller tours, even overseas, got really good there. Then became a national champion in PGA. But he grew his confidence kind of playing and being competitive on where his market was and where his skill set was, and eventually grew. And it seems like what we were talking about there was the budgets and working together and collaborating, and maybe it's not a good fit to take on the quote unquote big boys. Maybe that's not the competition we're looking for here. We're focusing on this over here, and putting yourself in the right position. And obviously it's not going to happen without collaboration, or it can happen. It's just the best result for everyone. It's collaboration, and like Travis said, communication, which by the way is, let me see, one of the 4 pillars of your. Talk to me about this. I mean, I'm sorry, Satya, did you want to go into a little bit more about this?
No, this is
sorry, real quick. I was smiling just because I'm thinking of the quote, all tides
rising tides raises all boats.
And we already talked, rising tides, and we already talked about the Sultana and the Titanic. So, sorry, I couldn't help but smile at that, thinking about that.
No, but I
bringing it back.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's true. That's true for not just the state and the city, but for city level organizations to think of it as even for their businesses and individual attractions, right? The individual attractions are spending their own marketing dollars, but they're kind of helping the DMO, the local DMO and the state DMO. And on the back end, it's kind of also important to realize that if the DMO is doing a great job, everybody wins. That's where like figuring out how to collaborate and teeing up, because Google and all have definitely done it where they want you to compete. It makes sense for their business model where they want you to compete against each other so they can raise the advertising rates. It's a bidding system by design. And that's true for Facebook, that's true for Google, that's obviously Instagram's part of Facebook. All these channels are created on the foundation that they're going to make people compete. And whether it's the local attractions putting the advertising dollars, DMOs and or state, if you're spending against each other, everybody is losing, and the only people winning are the people in the tech industry, which is not a bad thing. We are tech as well, but especially these advertising platforms. So I think that is something that everyone in this industry, especially coming out of the pandemic, has to watch for, because everyone does have a lot of the wallets have to catch up now from the last year. So something we need to be aware.
You're absolutely right, and I think that's why. I mean, I think this kind of leads into where you were going, Brian. The different pillars of kind of the work we do, and it's no one thing. It's not just our media and marketing spend and social. I mean, that is a large component, but it's going to take the communications and the PR efforts, which is kind of a whole different thing, but definitely fits in the cooperation lane quite well. And doesn't always get quite as competitive. Then also the sales. Now that's where sometimes tourism gets a little more competitive. But I know those people always play quite well together too. And there's plenty of examples of cooperation there. And at the state level, we do. I'm very, at least here in Arkansas, I'm very impressed with the way that our few key markets that play in that corporate and convention business coexist well with the regular state associations and how they move around only within the state, and then also staking out their area to bring in that regional and a little bit of that national kind of business that sometimes flows into our state. So that's good to see. It's very healthy to see, because I've seen it other places where it's like, no, we're the big boy, we're doing it all, and good luck if you can find any scraps. So it's very nice to see that cooperative spirit here in Arkansas.
And when you talk about,
go ahead.
Oh, okay. When I just want to clear this up, I make sure I understand completely here. So when you talk about sales, and we can get Satya, we can move on past this. When you talk about sales, are you talking about like when a DMO or CVB doing like kind of a bringing in the traveling kind of business that is like say a convention of some kind, like the EMS convention, or like some sort of big group?
I mean, sales can mean a whole bunch. I mean, for us, we're focused on motor coach sales, sports. Which is youth sports is a huge thing. I know right now, and definitely in this state, meetings, conventions, and then also on the international efforts, which right now are, in this kind of wait for go, laying all the groundwork to get back out there. But yeah, when I was talking about sales, primarily I was kind of speaking towards that convention and meeting type business. Some in the sports as well. That's become more and more of a competitive area, but the same kind of thing they have the chance to do. I mean, these youth sports teams, travel. So 3 out of 4 weekends every month. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity to be in many places.
Correct. So in talking about sales, let's just kind of going deeper a little bit in there. How do you work, and this is specifically for your office with cities who might be targeting a particular event or a convention? Are they coming to you? You are going to these cities, and how are you collaborating? And what do you recommend? And I'm sure you communicate directly with your own cities, but I'm trying to get out of you learnings on different communication models, which goes back to how do we collaborate and to bring in events, right?
Well, I'm going to work up to that point, kind of, and a lot of this predates me, but here when Motor Coach was a much bigger driver of things, they had what was called the A team, and it was the group of all the salespeople from all the CVBs and the state that they coordinated and collaborated what shows they wanted to be a part of, who they were bringing here. And with those, obviously, they're going to hit multiple stops. So, how are we building itineraries that fit all those? So, and that kind of was good in setting kind of a foundation for what other things could look like. Then it kind of emerged with sports, and now we have the Arkansas sports team. So, those cities that are a part of their marketing efforts, or part of their product is youth sports, or sometimes a little bit beyond youth sports as well. They meet regularly, and we make sure we're on the same page of what we're attending in shows, what kind of marketing pieces, what kind of publications we want to be in, and which ones they're targeting, and make sure that we're not duplicating efforts where it doesn't make sense, but also duplicating efforts where it does make sense.
Correct.
And that means if sometimes we might be sharing a booth with the whole team. Sometimes it might be just a couple, and they'll be representing the entire state. Sometimes it could be helping them be a sponsor at an event. So with that, they get extra appointments and they get extra exposures at, as an individual destination that none of them could do by themselves. But if the state steps forward, we're able to do that, and we're able to share leads for that too. And if there's certain publications they want to be a part of, we can go in and help, provide a co-op package for that, and they get their individual call outs, as well as, hey, Arkansas is a healthy place to do business for youth sports. And now I will say, as we move to the meeting convention, that is an area we're still kind of fleshing that out. Each one of those becomes a little more narrow who we're working with, and those relationships, because of COVID, there's some change of who's there and bringing people back into those roles at some of these cities, and we're reintroducing everybody to each other, and having, what is their strategy going to look like coming out of this? Because it's just gonna be different. I mean, it's pent up demand for everything, but that necessarily. I mean, I know there is demand for the end user to want to get back to that, but seems like there's a whole lot more hesitancy on the upper end of who's actually going to actually come and stick their neck out and go host and be responsible for saying we brought 1,000 people together. So we're working with those partners to make sure we're taking the right steps that put them in the best place, because ultimately in that they have the product that they gotta fulfill at the end.
Correct. And I think it's starting to happen. And I think the world as a whole is starting to figure out. Just last week, I believe, there was the Brit Awards in London, which they had, they are obviously at the top level, a top level kind of event. They had like 4,000 people coming in. And these name brand events are probably going to be the ones who are going to have to take the lead to open up the entire industry, because I think of South by Southwest here in the US. They were one of the first ones to cancel, which really made the news last year. And they're going to be the ones who has to open. But South by South, unfortunately, their timing is in March typically. And, they had to just push it back, or I don't know what happened to South by Southwest this year. But I think it's going to be the top ones who are going to have to kind of lead the way, and so that the smaller ones feel comfortable to go in. Somebody's going to have to do it for sure.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I mean, some little smaller ones will happen, obviously, but they won't get the attention or provide the validity that it can happen. The same as those, and they provide that credibility that, look, I mean, if they can bring 2,500 or 25,000 people together, then we can definitely bring 500 people together here on a regular basis, or 2,500 or whatever it may be for the different types of events.
And
No, that's awesome. Now, to just step back, I was reading, we were reading earlier, this was, so your 4 pillars are, just to kind of list them out: research and development, sales, communications, and welcome centers. Welcome centers are probably the easiest to understand. We talk enough about sales. What kind of research and development are you guys doing, and what do you plan to do as you take over and get this all restarted over the next few years? And what are you looking at? What are you hoping to get out of it?
Under that, is obviously research, but also under development is our regional tourism associations. We have 12 that we provide matching, a very generous matching grant program to those regional associations on a yearly basis. And then we also run a few other grants through there, some event grants, and also one that I think is a little more unique to Arkansas is we have a feasibility study grant for tourism type attractions to see, which has spurned on some good stuff through the years. And I don't know if it gets quite enough credit as it should sometimes. And then kind of on the research side, I mean, with some of the new data organization and data visualization tools that are being developed, that is something that we are vetting out right now to add to, I would like to say, help us have it more available for decision making. We've always done a good job, I think here it looks like, of having the data for reporting sake. And and where it makes sense, we can make some decisions off of that too. But we're looking at those avenues that we can have the data, and new stuff is coming available, like in a flood, it seems like now, which is real exciting, to be able to help our decision-making process for marketing, for communications, correct, even for welcome centers, and what kind of impacts those have, and be able to then communicate that to our different audiences, whether that be our commission or the secretary and the governor here, or the industry itself, are all ways we want to be able to use the research that we're trying to target. So
that's pretty neat. And you mentioned grants. I imagine these organizations have to apply for these grants with you. Yeah, is that
with
correct?
The regional tourism associations, and this is interesting, and this is actually I think when we talked about the connection between the state office and the CVB, Arkansas has not always been as strong in that connection. I think actually because of these regional tourism associations that were created back in, I think, the late 60s or early 70s here, kind of predating most of our CVBs. And this was kind of, at that time, probably the best way to be doing that, to getting state money to those different areas to market. And we are having discussions with each one of how to make sure we're utilizing it best for each different region. But because they're official, they're already pre-vetted, they're kind of we know who they are. They each get an official set aside money, equal amount every year. Now they do have to submit, approved uses of it. The primary use is marketing, which is good. Marketing and visitor guides and some event-based stuff, and then some administrative as well.
Absolutely.
So we obviously approve all those, but it's a little bit different than a CVB or a festival applying for an event grant or a marketing competitive marketing grant.
And I was going to ask, so the
2/3 match.
Initially, when you mentioned regional associations, so and seems like these grants are old. Let me step back and understand a little bit more. How are these regional associations different from CVBs? Can you give us a little bit of a background on?
Well, I wish I could say they're different because CVBs are like this and the regional tourism associations are like that. But It'd have to be saying, no, this region is different because it's this, and this
Okay.
region is different because you have a region in central Arkansas that has Little Rock, North Little Rock, and Conway that are three of its biggest drivers, which are full functioning, some of our
Correct.
biggest CVBs. And then you have some parts of regions that might only have one or two very small, maybe not even staffed CVBs in the entire
Okay.
region. And, they might have a membership within that region that helps bring up their match.
Okay.
And there's a mix. Some has good involvement with CVBs, some doesn't, because the CVBs, they do their thing, and this is the way for those areas that aren't represented by CVB to get representation. So it has evolved into definitely a not a one size fits all, which is probably a good thing, because it's a
Probably a good
very
thing. Yeah.
diverse, great diversity between each region. I do think there's some areas we're trying to look at each one individually and have those conversations of what can we be doing to better serve y'all, and what are y'all doing to better serve your region, and make sure that we're none of us are stuck, in a rut, that we're constantly using the new tools and the data that we have available to help them do what they need to do,
Yeah.
and thus helping those areas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and I know, Brian, one more question that popped up in my mind. I know this is something, again, you are filling in newly in this role, but this is budget season for a lot of CVBs. They're right in the thick of it. And in some ways, you are on the receiving end now of some of these grant proposals or some sort of grant requests. What do you, for anyone putting together their proposal, what do you like to see? What would you like to see? What is, and it seems like this money might go in anyways, but this is a general question, right? Like, how do you want to build your budget? Because I'm sure it's relevant learning at this point in time, this time of the year, right?
Yeah, and it's tough depending on if you're looking like at an event grant. And maybe that's the best way to approach it. That's more typical you would see in different places. That kind of festival or event marketing grant that sometimes is much an educational effort as it is a funding effort, because our goal is not to tell the people in that town, in that local newspaper, or the local radio station to come to that festival. It's for them to market outside,
Correct.
typically, outside maybe 60 miles, whatever limit someone puts on it, and learning how to do that. And that doesn't mean go to the next town and find their newspaper. It doesn't mean don't do that, but how are you looking at the new digital opportunities out there? And that also, I think, puts some onus on us to how can we build, or come up beside them and walk them through doing that in the most efficient way, because it's not something that everyone knows how to do well. And that's when, especially when we get in these regional associations, that we have that ongoing relationship. How can we maybe blend some of what we're already doing, efforts, marketing, advertising, and social spend, all the paid areas, to pull some of their campaigns to run alongside ours, as instead of saying, here it is, y'all figure out your best plan, we'll hopefully approve it. Like, okay, let's go a little bit back up and make sure, and it'll make our reach go further while also giving them some of their own identity in some of our efforts.
Correct. I just checked the time. We blew through an hour
Right
here. I'm so sorry. But Brian, I don't know if you want to just the more we do it, your team gets more of a work, the more we record. But I'll let you handle it. I do have one question before we have to start talking about our goodbyes. Welcome centers is obviously a big thing, but I mean, generally everyone knows the visitor centers have been kind of reducing. I mean, this is kind of a global phenomenon, almost reducing traffic. over time. So what is your vision for your welcome centers next, 5-10 years? How are that visitor engagement is obviously something that we are passionate about. What are some of the things that you are imagining future will bring, or you plan to do immediately in the next 2-3 years?
Well, I will say we have an extremely passionate group of staff members that do that, and they were they were born for these positions, and
That's awesome.
COVID was very hard on them because that's where they received as much energy back as they extended to those visitors, and they weren't allowed to do that, and they're so happy to be back out there. And we've actually been looking, and we tracked our first quarter of visitation, and not across, if you put them all together, we beat 2020 numbers for March, which was partially affected, but we beat 2019 numbers.
That's awesome.
For visitation. Now, that wasn't every single center, but when you put them all together, that means we have multiple ones that beat 2019 and some didn't. But that also is with, and y'all might not have experienced this, we had any, depending on the welcome center, anywhere between 4 and 8 days that we were closed because we had this freak ice snow storm.
Oh, yes.
In February, that can affect visitation quite well. So despite that, we still have visitation numbers that are approaching or ahead of 2019 numbers, which
That's awesome.
is incredible. And we have tracked, when I started and I looked at it, outside of COVID, just looking back, our visitation has not been trailing off in ours. And I don't know if that is, they had invested in the previous 5 or so years with newer facilities that were quite attractive, and the restrooms are open, 24/7, but we're open 9 to 5. But that's every day of the year, but 4 days for holidays. I mean, every day. So, and I guess some of the strategic locations we're at helps with that too, and maybe just the reputation they've built for their friendliness, helpfulness, and it's interesting, and it's quite impressive. I heard it said by multiple people. You go in and like, what is the essence of your job? And it would make sense. Oh, to help someone, get them where they want to go, make sure we have whatever. But they said, no, our job is to extend their stay. Our job is to make sure that they can experience as absolutely much as possible that expands the impact of them being here. And the impact is economic for us, but it's in memories and experiences for the guest. So it is mutually beneficial for everyone. And to hear them think that way is tremendous for the frontline employees that don't, sometimes have the reputation of not always being there and getting it. These people get it, and we're very blessed to have them as part of our team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is amazing that you say it this way, and the fact that you guys have managed to. So first off, visitor center workers are also frontline workers. As we have talked about frontline workers through this pandemic, and they also did deserve almost same credit. Unfortunately, most of them didn't get to work that way, the way they love. So I think what they do day in and day out is amazing. But the fact that you guys have, or your past management and going forward has managed to train them in such a way that they do see the underlying value that they're bringing to the community, that's critical. Either extending the stay or making it interesting enough that even if people cannot stay, they make a mental note that I'm going to come back here 6 months from now, right? And that's another head in bed, as they call it.
And they truly have built a reputation where they all could say we have our regulars. I mean, that awesome. Every year, every quarter, every time they make that trip, they're stopping there, and not just to go to the bathroom, but to have that conversation, to learn about the next new thing they could be a part of, or what events are happening during that time. And they have the knowledge to share all that, which is tremendous.
And that's the holy grail of all destination marketing. Again, we talked about the bottom of the funnel, or I mentioned it earlier. If you can get the visitor that already was there come back again instead of going somewhere else, you have won in your visitor information, because that's a free visitor. You didn't have to market them this time. They already saw it and they had made a decision to come back. So you saved money on the marketing dollars on the other end, and you didn't have to compete on the marketing dollars with every other attention, because they already love that destination. And then as they say in the industry, it all begins with a visit. Somebody's coming one time, they might come next year, and then they might end up buying a house and investing in the region, right? So
Absolutely.
it all begins with a visit. So
all right. Well, I think we exhausted the entire hour. Travis, I know your cutoff is about a few minutes here, so we just want to say thank you for joining us. And to summarize, research and development, sales, communications, and welcome centers. We're going to learn more about that too. It's a wealth of information and knowledge there. His name is Travis Napper, and he is the Director of Tourism within the Arkansas Department of Parks, Heritage, and Tourism. You can find him on Twitter / Travis Napper, and he's on LinkedIn as well. I hope you don't mind me, Travis. If you have any links or any social medias that you want to shout out, please go ahead and do that now. Do you have anything you want to share?
Arkansas.com and any of our social media will be much more productive than going to mine. I'll tell you that.
Okay. So DMO, I got it right here.
Yeah.
Twitter is AR Tourism, like Arkansas AR Tourism, and LinkedIn Arkansas Tourism there as well. And Instagram is / Arkansas. You got the name just Arkansas. Yeah. So that's a good name.
Yeah, I think we got that for that on Facebook. So.
And thank you for listening to the HootBoard Visitor Information and Destination Marketing Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on all major places where we listen to podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, and we're also on YouTube. Please subscribe to us there as well. I am Brian Reynolds, and thank you. And Satya, thank you. Any last words?
No, that's it. We look forward to this episode being out there. This was exciting. This was good.
And one last thank you to Travis. Thank you so much, Travis. You were great.
My pleasure.